A man finds a strange-looking snake, and when the guard arrives, he said, "You shouldn't be looking at this." When Peter first met this snake, he knew he'd found something special, but his curiosity soon got the better of him. Because when Peter got too close to the snake, he was bitten by it. But that didn't seem to be the main concern of the ranger who had found him. The only thing that seemed important to him was that Peter had never seen this snake in the first place. Peter was in a complete panic. He had no idea where the ranger was taking him, and his hand was still bleeding profusely. He had no idea whether the snake was poisonous or not. All he knew was that he needed to go to the hospital, but he was pretty sure that the ranger wasn't going there. Peter shouted for help, but when the rangers finally reached him, Peter quickly stopped screaming again. But what was the explanation for the strange-looking snake, and where'd the ranger take him? This was no ordinary snake. Peter wasn't even sure it was a normal animal. It appeared out of nowhere and terrified him. He was alone about a mile away from civilization, and no one knew where he was. If he'd been bitten by a snake, it would have been the end of it. And although Peter was well aware of this, he didn't pay attention to whether there were snakes around. He was traveling through the woods, but it was not a common snake area. It was too cold for them here. But again, this is obviously not another typical snake. Luckily, Peter was paying close attention, but it was almost impossible to miss the snake. Almost everything around was green and brown, which would normally have been perfect camouflage for a snake, but the animal was actually brightly colored. However, Peter mainly associated it with frogs and smaller amphibians. Whatever this snake was, it was strange, and Peter didn't want to get close to the animal. However, he photographed it and pinned it to the map where he found it. Perhaps someone knew more about this animal. The snake itself seemed uninterested in moving. It crawled out of the cover and settled right in the path Peter was going to take. Not wanting to risk anything, Peter decided to turn around and go back to the hotel. But he wasn't done with his animal. On the way back to his hotel, Peter decided to post about snakes on his social media. He didn't expect anyone to know anything about it, but he just thought it was a bit of fun. He knew his ex-girlfriend loved animals, so he might be able to get her attention again by posting pictures. He also shared the name of the forest he encountered. However, that's exactly what made the post stand out to people other than his followers. And these people were not satisfied with what they saw. At the time, a lot was going on behind the scenes after Peter posted about a snake he knew nothing about, and the post was taken down. Peter only noticed this when he arrived at the hotel. He knew he posted the post because he still had some messages about his post in his inbox. Did he violate some terms of service of which he was unaware? However, he didn't really have time to ask questions or re-upload the post, as Peter suddenly received a call from an unknown local number. He was weirded out because he knew nobody and he'd only arrived 2 days ago. How'd they know his phone number? The voice over the receiver was deep and determined. He tells Peter that he's calling on behalf of the local wildlife authorities and they need to talk to him. They saw the picture of the strange snake he posted and wanted to ask some questions about it. Peter was confused, but he made it clear he didn't have much of a choice, since the man knew what hotel Peter was in. Peter had no idea what was going on in this situation, so he decided to fully cooperate. He didn't want any trouble. Peter was supposed to wait at the forest entrance, where a ranger would meet him. Peter was then supposed to take the rangers to the exact spot where he encountered the snake. Since Peter could already hear a voice telling him he shouldn't mess with this ranger and he should fully cooperate with him. Peter was nervous to be in the forest again. He had no idea what trouble he was in, but he already had a feeling something was wrong here. Peter just had a disgusting hunch that this might not end well for him. The guard arrived a few minutes after Peter arrived and didn't greet him or introduce himself. He looked him right in the eye and told Peter to start walking. Peter felt quite pressured by the ranger and didn't dare to argue with him. The ranger was following the increasingly nervous Peter without a word. Peter didn't know what he was expecting. The snake should be gone by now anyway, but since it's been hours since he'd seen it, it's almost impossible to find it in this huge forest. But when they get to the spot, Peter was actually very surprised to see the animal still there. Peter didn't have big eyes, but thanks to the snake's bright color, he can spot it from quite a distance. Somewhat foolishly, Peter decided to get close to the snake to get a good look at the animal. Seeing that the snake was still in the same spot, he was afraid that it might have died there. But that wasn't true at all, and all of a sudden, the snake bit him. It all happened so fast that Peter barely had time to process what had happened. He felt a stinging pain in his hand, and slowly blood began to pour out. Turning to the very angry ranger, he quickly began to feel dizzy. This whole situation wasn't good for Peter. He was short of breath and had severe pain in his arm, but the caretaker didn't seem to mind. Peter begged the ranger to take him to the hospital, but the ranger didn't care. The ranger was taking him somewhere other than the hospital. As Peter and the ranger walked to the ranger's secret location, Peter's condition got worse and worse. He had to go to the hospital because he was really looking like he was going to die. He begged the ranger to go to the hospital, but the ranger said he was almost there. But where? They're in the middle of a forest. It seemed like forever, but after only about 10 minutes, they arrived at a large, modern building hidden deep in the forest. The people there seemed to be able to help Peter. The guard immediately took Peter to another man who was sitting outside working on his laptop. Peter wanted to go outside to get medical help, but he was forced to and was placed on a table in front of the man. He immediately started questioning Peter about everything. Peter could hardly understand what the man was saying, let alone adequately answer all the questions he asked him. He really needed medical help here. Peter's body gave up and he passed out. He was barely alive. Suddenly, Peter wakes up on a bed in a room that appears to be in a hospital. Feeling better, he seriously thought that the ranger might have dreamed of taking him to a secret location, but it wasn't true. Peter was handcuffed to the bed, and his joy that he was feeling better soon turned into confusion. Why was he handcuffed? And where is he? So many questions ran through his head, but Peter knew he had to get out of there quickly. The guard who brought Peter to this scary place came into the room early, and Peter could see by the look on the guard's face that he didn't go to help Peter. Knowing this, Peter asked the ranger for help, but in vain. The caretaker immediately began asking Peter questions about how he got into that forest, where specifically he lived, and whether he had any family. The ranger's questions initially fooled Peter, but when he added, "We can't let you go," Peter realized why he was asking that question. After an unpleasant conversation with the guard left the room, and Peter immediately realized that he had to get out of there as soon as possible if he wanted to survive or return to normal life. This was his moment of escape. Peter was handcuffed to the bed, so he had to find something to free him from the handcuffs. It could be something like tweezers or a hard object that can be used to break handcuffs. Tweezers appeared in the table drawer. This was an ideal way to break the handcuffs. He kept trying, but suddenly heard a sound coming from down the hallway and into his room. Is that a ranger? Fortunately, it turned out to be nothing. Maybe it's someone walking through his door. So after several minutes of struggling, Peter was finally able to free himself from the handcuffs. All right, now what? Peter thought to himself. He has to be careful here. As Peter's walking cautiously down the hallway, he suddenly sees another person who is asking questions before passing out. He seemed very worried about something and ran into the room. Peter wondered if he should just leave or figure out what this secret location might be hiding. He can find great things here, but it could also endanger his whole life. Peter felt he was in a dilemma. What should he do? Peter eventually decides to follow the man and investigate what this mysterious place might be hiding. It seems no one knew, considering it was completely hidden in the woods. Peter can probably find something big. He followed the man and came to a hallway full of screaming people. Something seemed wrong here, and Peter was determined to find out what it was. Peter wants to enter the room to see what's going on, but he can't do this with the kind of clothes he's wearing now. He has to change into normal clothes. Looking around, he finds a room where the clothes of the employees are hanging. How lucky! Peter quickly goes and changes into his normal clothes. Now that the place is overwhelmingly crowded, he won't stand out from the rest. So now no one will notice his presence. Peter thought to himself, okay, it's time to go into the room. Peter went into the great room with all the officers. Everyone was talking to each other and shouting. One officer even said, "We have to tell the world this. We can't hide this from them." Another agent then completely disagreed and urged him to keep his mouth shut. It seemed to be a big deal if even the agents knew about this, so Peter wondered what it was. When Peter saw the agents there, he knew he had to stay away from them. He went to the other agents to get all the information. Peter was looking for an officer he could easily convince. He noticed that Arthur seemed a little easy to approach. If some other officer notices, it'll be game over. However, he decided to risk and ask. When he discovered what Arthur said, he was surprised. They had acquired a whole creature with strange eggs. They thought it was going to explode, but why did all these agents discuss it? They had to make sure these eggs were carefully stored. The sound coming out of the egg got louder and louder, and then the egg began to move. It seemed that something was coming out of it. Everyone stopped debating and went to the egg, and something amazing happened. Gave birth to a strange snake, but it turned out to be a harmless new species. So everyone calmed down. There's no need to hide anything, and the government shouldn't be too paranoid about such new discoveries. No need to hide such information from civilization. Peter was then released and went home, and the agents apologized for the trouble he had to go through.